you're sitting with your mental health provider and you feel totally at ease, no problem, unless you're like stable, you know. But if you're in the search for finding stability and you're just like, okay, cool, sun's out, awesome, see ya, they're not the right person.
Yeah.
They need to trigger you, but also understand how to fix you. And so it's a hard balance, and it's not easy. You're not going to make an appointment today and find the right person. It's so rare. But you also need to understand as you go through this, and you are your self-advocate like we were talking about before, then you know when it's not right. So even have a journal, write it down, just so you can remember, take control of your illness. But I realized I've had a new psychiatrist because I was allowing my PCP to prescribe my medicines because I wasn't changing them. I hadn't changed them for years. And, but kind of to go, well, I'll finish this thought, and then something kind of important for the women out there. So she said she was learning about, I finally went in to see it because I forget how heavy of a bipolar I am because I do manage it so well. I forget sometimes. And then she made me go down the list. Oh, tell me about your history. Tell me about your stuff. Oh, I was diagnosed when I was 14. I've had 2 attempted suicides. I've been hospitalized. I have schizophrenic tendencies. My trigger are heat, and my trigger is actually small things like glitter, or if it starts to sprinkle, I will get violently ill and I'll go into a panic attack. And that's how I know I'm starting to cycle. 2 Christmases ago, which is a trigger always, the stress of Christmas, we were in Michael's with my husband, and I was looking around, and the glitter on the bows and on the trees made me feel like I couldn't breathe. And I was just like, I just felt like I was having a panic attack. And so I looked at my husband and I'm like, I'm cycling. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, because this glitter makes me want to fucking burst into tears and run away and hide. And he's like, okay. And then we talked about it, and then I started taking my Xanax, and I brought myself out of it. And so understanding your triggers, but I was telling her, these are my triggers. This is what happens when I, am depressed. I just literally go into almost a coma, which, just so you know, suicide watch for those of the people who have loved ones who are bipolar or even depressives or anything like this. A lot of the perception is that when you're in a deep depression is when people are most likely to commit suicide, but people are most likely to commit suicide when they're coming out of their depression, right? So when a lot of times what I experience and what some other people experience, and this is why they say this, is that when you're in such a heavy depression that you're paralyzed, it's almost too much work to try to kill yourself. You're just too tired. You're just like, I'm just going to lay here until I just go away, hopefully. But to come up with a plan to actually try to kill yourself, it's exhausting. You're just like, I'm just whatever. But then what happens is you start medicating or finding the right thing, and you're rising out of that fog is when the emotions start happening and the realization, and you're still in a depressive state, but you're not, you start finding the energy to think about hurting yourself. And so it's when you are with somebody or you're yourself and you're starting to medicate yourself, that's when people need to watch you the most. Just like in a bipolar person, we think that depression is when people kill themselves. It's been proven that it's actually mania that is usually when bipolar people kill themselves. And so just because someone's in a mania doesn't mean that they shouldn't be watched for suicide. And so these are really important things to know. But so I was talking to her about my illness, and just I really was triggered in that moment of just sadness of, I forgot that this is what I am. And, this is what I deal with. But then on the other side, so proud of myself for taking care of myself, because I'm not a mild bipolar. But she asked me, she said, do you have OCD? She was going through the list of typical bipolar checklists. She's like, do you have OCD moments or whatever? I'm like, no, not OCD. And then, but as she was talking to me, she was in an old building, and she was talking to me, and I'm looking behind her, and she had 2 windows, and they weren't the same. And she's talking to me, I'm staring at the windows, and I'm like, I'm sorry, your windows are off, and it's killing me. How do you live like that? And then she looks at me and she's like, so no OCD tendencies at all? And I'm like, oh, because I think of OCD as shutting the door 4 times before you leave and things like that. I'm like, oh, I'm like, so you mean because your picture's a little crooked and I'm losing my shit? That's not normal? Because I couldn't be in this office with those windows. I'd have to freaking shiv it down a little bit and make it even. She's like, I was like, oh, so I started looking at everything differently. And I started realizing when I exploded at my husband because he doesn't clean the counters the way I think. The reason why I don't clean my house all the time is because it's not going to be done to the level that I think it should be done. When I walk into my salon and someone broke down a box and they left it at the behind the desk, I can be aggravated, but I shouldn't be angered. Mm-hmm. And so I'm realizing, and this is a new path I'm on, and so I'm not choosing to medicate it because I'm afraid that if I try to medicate that, it's going to send me what's really fixed. It's going to unfix some of it, which can happen. Mm-hmm. And so I'm choosing to do a mental narrative on it, making the people I love around me aware of what I'm now trying, that I realize this is actually not a normal thing that I'm realizing, and I'm trying to fix it through a narrative. So, and my husband now knows he's allowed to call me on it. That's that's a little bit too heavy of a reaction, and me finding myself and things like that. And so, no, I'm not medicating everything.
And you still have the other thing too is like you can choose to change your mind about that in the future, which is something that like sometimes we get on our soapbox and we are like, well, this is what I decided, I guess, to die by, and you don't have to. You can step down and be like, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to say something different.
Well, exactly.
Because it didn't work.
That's growth, right? Mm-hmm. But the reason why I think that I really wanted to kind of point that out is because medication isn't going to fix everything.
No.
And I see a lot of people go down that rabbit hole of like, okay, well, this is better, but this is still a problem. So now I need to medicate this, and this is still a problem, and this is still a problem. And then all of a sudden you have so many chemicals in your body. And then a lot of times people just throw it all out. Okay, I'm not going to be on medication. And there's a happy medium is what I really want to kind of get across. Is there's a happy medium. Is that if you can medicate the big stuff, the stuff that you can't live life with, and then have a professional help you narrate the smaller stuff, that's okay. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't just medicate illness without having somebody make it so you can have a narrative. You have to be able to talk yourself down a little bit. You have to be able to talk yourself in and out of situations while you're being medicated.
You have to learn to be comfortable enough to have a conversation with yourself, because that's one of the hardest things to do as a person, is to take ownership and responsibility for our own actions and for what we're going through. Just in general, for people who aren't mentally ill and for people who are, like, taking responsibility and taking stock with yourself is really uncomfortable, because it means that you have to confront things that are very uncomfortable sometimes, or acknowledge that you did something shitty.
Exactly.
And now how do I deal with it? It's a lot easier to be like, well, they just overreacted and it's their problem that they took it personally and whatever, whether it's that or anything else. Like, okay, why do I feel this way? What happened to me in the past? Is that something? Because then you have to relive things that might have been really awful.
And then the onion starts to peel.
Yes, all the layers. The layers and layers and layers.
Which is why it's important to have a professional.
Yes. And they can help you decide, like, when to do things and when to not. So, like, okay, you have, like, I have CPTSD, which is complex PTSD. It's derived through trauma that you experience as a child.
Okay.
And there's different ways to handle it. And some of the therapies for it are, like, reliving the traumas to work through them. And it's really important before you just dive in and start thinking about those things and reliving them and remembering all of those instances and issues. Like, you need to figure out if it's a good idea or not, or if you're at a point where it's stable enough, or if you're in a safe enough environment too.
Right, safe. That's the important keyword.
And a professional can help you figure that out.
Your friends and your family and your spouses and your parents are not professionals.
No.
They cannot narrate you out into safety.
No. And even if they can, they shouldn't have to, because it's going to change your dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's going to make it an unhealthy burden of responsibility permanently. Like, I heard something once and I loved it, because in a relationship, in any relationship, there's a picture and there's a frame. So there's going to be times in life where one person's going to be the frame and they're going to be holding up the photo and the picture. So whether that person's a picture because they're the center of attention and it's their time to shine, or whether they're the picture because they're going through something really deep and emotional and they need that support.
Right.
But it should change. Like, there should be times where the other person is the picture and you're the frame.
I love that.
Yeah, isn't it? It's really cute.
It's a great metaphor.
But there's going to be, if they're the person that has to narrate you out of your shit, and like if you're like, I'm going to unpack all these deep, awful things that I experienced as a child, you're going to make sure I'm safe, right? Then you are permanently the picture and they're stuck being the frame, and that's not fair, because where's the attention that they get? And I find that that's when I notice and watch other people's relationships fall apart, or where somebody becomes really, really resentful of their spouse, of their child, of their parent, of their whatever. Because if you think that your parents don't do this to you, you're on crack. Because, like, people's parents, a lot of times, unintentionally put that burden on their kids.
Absolutely.
Like, often, I see it all the time, where, like, the parent doesn't know how to deal with the shit, because especially right now, like, our generation, the generation below us, are being raised much more open with mental illness. It's becoming something that they talk about more and more. Like, younger kids are like, I think I might have this, and it's like, well, you don't, but it's good that you acknowledge that that exists. That's amazing. Which
I want you to finish your thought, but I want to kind of just say one thing. It's be careful with that, because that is what's happening, is that it's almost like everyone feels like they have to have a diagnosis because they have feelings.
Yes.
And so remember that if you are a younger person,
feelings are normal.
Feelings are normal. Ups and downs are normal. When you're a girl and you're having hormones, you're gonna go in ups and downs and stuff. If you feel like you need help, seek help. But don't be discouraged because you don't have a diagnosis.
No, if you have a mood swing, it's not the same thing as being bipolar.
Right. So do your research and things like that. Talk to the people. If you're concerned, talk to someone about it. That is when you go to your mom or your dad or whatever. And then if you feel like you need help, vocalize it. But also, don't get yourself into a situation where you're getting yourself a diagnosis and now all of a sudden you're on medications that you don't need. And you want to believe that all doctors will be like, oh, you don't need medicine. But that's not true.
No.
You know?
Especially if they're spending 10 minutes with you. Then they don't have enough information.
Okay, so finish your thoughts.
Yeah, so a lot of time parents, especially, you know, the older generations that didn't have support, didn't have communication, didn't have the access to information that we have, or, you know, it was so looked down on to be mentally ill or admit that you have feelings in general, especially if you're a man.
Right.
But they put the burden of their mental illness on their kids.
Yes.
And there's no way out of it sometimes. And you'll, like, one of the ways that I've found to recognize when somebody's done it, because, like, there are times where, like, people just need help, but when you feel like, oh, I can't do that because it will kill my mom, or like, oh, I can't do that because my dad will lose his shit. Like, if you feel like as an adult or as a more grown person that, oh, I can't move here, or their whole life will crumble.
Right.
You're in an unhealthy relationship with your parent.
And also, that's a lot of people get stuck in relationships that way. I can't leave because he or she's going to kill themselves because they threatened that. Now, if somebody's threatening suicide if you leave, that's a different situation.
Yeah, no, that's manipulation and abuse.
That's manipulation. You know, help them find a safe place and bounce, because that's unhealthy for you.
Yeah. Right?
Just because you have a mental illness does not give you a pass to abuse the people around you.
Correct.
It doesn't give you an excuse, oh, it's because I was this or because I was this. That's where I say that you have a responsibility to take care. It is a decision to make the effort to get yourself healthy and in a safe place, and to continue to take your medication. And if your medication doesn't work, find a professional to help you find a new medication. It is a decision to go down that path. And so that is a responsibility, right? And that's, you know, kind of tying into you, that if the parents are hurting their children by projecting that onto them, they already haven't made the decision to take care of themselves, therefore hurting someone else. And that's where I say, when you have a mental illness, it's your responsibility. I am not a bipolar person. I am a person with bipolar, and I choose to take care of it. I choose to work with myself to be able to find the triggers. I chose to, take medication every single day to be responsible with it and things like that. Now, with that said, I'm way deep into my journey. Mm-hmm. I'm in a much healthier place, and and that wasn't my beginning narrative. And so that's important to understand, that I'm sitting here saying that this is where you want to get to, but it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy. And I went through a lot, and I had a safe person.
It wasn't like you started in 2003 and then in 2004 you were like,
I'm perfect.
Done.
No, it took me a long time to realize I was still having ups and downs. Mm-hmm. I realized when I went to this new psychiatrist that I actually had been in a little bit of a mania all summer. And I was like, it really messed me up. It screwed me up. And I didn't realize until I was talking to her about things.
Well, and now that you talk about the triggers that you have, like when we were in Italy on the bus and you were like raging about stuff that was happening at the salon, I'm like, oh, mm-hmm. If I knew what her triggers were, what her signs were, I would have been like, oh, she's kind of starting to slide up.
Yeah. I was actually in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Because some of the because remember, lack of sleep, heavy stress, and drinking can get you into mm-hmm. an unhealthy place. Especially with bipolar. Lack of sleep and stress are the two biggest catapults into going into a mania or a depression or whichever one you are, and you start with. I didn't realize it because it was so
slow,
so just above
mm-hmm.
that Brandon, my husband, didn't even recognize it. It was just enough to just make my life just suck for a while. And there was stuff that, what happened when I was gone at the salon was a big deal, but I was very reactionary to it. And it was like heightened in my feelings, probably higher than it should have been. And so I couldn't catch it, mm-hmm. I didn't, and that was a part of the OCD that I didn't realize I had rearing its ugly head. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things, I've been recently working with a business coach, and I've been taking a lot of the things he says and putting it into just regular life. But there's this thing that he was talking about, unspoken promises, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just expect you to know that you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't say that, or you shouldn't whatever. I expect you to just know that, because that's how I think. Mm-hmm. And then I'm mad at you because
for not
doing it, because in my mind you made that promise to me, because I just expect you to know it. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I'm screwing that whole thing up. He always says it better. But the point is that it made me really think about it. Like, that cutting down cardboard and leaving out front, to me, is a no freaking brainer. Like, nobody needs to walk through the door and see that. But that's me. Just like I notice how dirty light switches are, and I notice that there's cobwebs in the corner, and I notice symmetry in freaking architectural buildings. Now everybody notices that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I can't assume that everyone's going to do it to my liking, and that's unspoken promises, and that's something to recognize. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. Yeah, that's really important to understand when you're in an unhealthy relationship, but with your parents, you can't always get yourself out of that unhealthy relationship.
No. Well,
as an adult, you can.
As an adult, you can, but it's important to recognize that it's like, if you are in that it's not your fault. Mm-hmm. And then, like, when you're in when you're in a relationship and you feel that responsibility and you just stay and you just stay and you just stay to your detriment, like, it's also unhealthy. And it can be really hard to figure out what else to do instead. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize, like, I was in a relationship and my boyfriend was so severely depressed. And I was like, I can't, like, he cannot function if mm-hmm. I, like, leave. And I felt responsible. But I also didn't realize, because I was so busy, like, with work and then constantly worrying about him and, like, dealing with his reactions and his explosions and everything else, then I wasn't looking at the fact that, like, I was in a severe depression and had no idea because I was just fucking functioning to function.
Right.
But if I look back at it now, I'm like, I was miserable. I never did anything. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't clean. I didn't like, I just was.
You're just being.
Yeah, I was just being and existing because that was felt like my only choice and option. And I wasn't on medication at that point except for my ADHD, which is not nearly the same thing as something that helps work with depression. But I just had no idea. So, like, at work, I was a nightmare. Like, I was a nightmare everywhere, but I was too busy just being like, well, I'm just stressed, and it's just stress. And
right,
and
stress. It's just this. Because that's your normal at that moment.
Yeah.
And so you're not
when
going to be
your baseline
like...
slowly changes, you don't recognize it.
Right.
Whereas, like, when you have a really quick change, which happens to me, like, has happened to me more recently a couple times, it's like, okay, no, I know that I'm in a depressed state because of A, B, and C, and this is what I felt like 3 weeks ago, and that was fine. Like, just certain things. So it's really...
And that's the thing is, and kind of going off of, you were saying you, like, collect people that, it's also important to... I have someone who's very close to me right now who recently was diagnosed bipolar, and she had some other issues that she was hospitalized for and things like that. And she's starting to realize, because she's getting better, she's at that baseline where she's right here and she needs to be here, and there's a lot of years between it. Her friends are not the right friends for her are not the friends who are going through the same thing. Because what happens is that, and that's something also, because friend groups can be made of all people with mental illnesses, and then you start coming here, and then this person goes through something, and then they pull you down, and then there's some guilt in there. Like, I'm doing great, but Samantha's doing terrible. I can't really call her and all these things. So it's good to have people to be able to be like what we're doing right now, talking about it, understanding that this is my normal and this is your normal and this is what we do and the struggles in life. But you also need to have some health in there, some kind of baseline of stability that you can look at and grasp onto and aim for. Because, and it's also okay to understand that there are friends for that moment that don't always mean they're friends for life. And there's a lot of guilt in that. And that's kind of where that, like, oh, she's, sick, I can't not be her friend because it will trigger her. And if you have somebody who you think will be triggered by you leaving, then you need to help them find help, but then you need to remove yourself. And so understanding that it's okay that if there were people in your life that you needed in that moment to learn a lesson, to get yourself through something, to whatever, it doesn't mean you owe them your forever.
Which, it's not just friendships, it's relationships too.
Exactly.
Like, a lot of times people stay in any type of relationship for way too long because they're like, well, I've already invested this time, or I've spent this much time, we've been together this long, I can't just debate. Yes, you can. Like, if it's time, if the milk is expired, you gotta throw it away. So you, when it's a human being, you can't just dump it down the sink and call it a day. But, like, you need to acknowledge that it's time, and if they're not in a safe place, try to help them find one. If they don't want to, you can't force somebody to.
And that's what I'm saying. It's a decision. And it's not, you can't make me get myself better. I have to decide that I want to be
just
better.
Like sobriety and all other things. Like, if you don't make that choice, nobody can make it for you. They can sure as hell try. But it's not going to work the same way as when you're like, it's time. This is what I want. This is what I need. And sometimes you don't know that you need it until somebody makes you aware of it. But you have
to have the hard conversations with people, because if that person is only standing up like a marionette because you're their strings, that's a problem. Because that, you can't put that on people, and you can't put that on yourself, that you're the strings that hold someone up. You need to help them find professional strings to hold them up. So you can remove yourself and put yourself in a safe situation. And then if you're that person who has a strings that hold you up, you need to self-reflect and say, how come I'm so dependent on this person and not dependent on myself?
And how can I become more dependent on yourself? And don't shame yourself because you're in that spot, because if that's where you are, everybody's at different spots at some point in their life. But like, figure out, like, okay, I do that to people. Like, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I'm that person that, like, if somebody leaves, I'm going to crumble and fall apart. Do they feel like they're only here because of that? Like,
right.
It's not something you should feel terrible about yourself
No.
for, but it's just a sign like, okay, I need to get help.
Right.
Like, it's okay to need help and it's okay to ask for help. It's just time to do so. And if that person leaves and you're going to fall apart, like, you definitely need to work because something can always happen. Things can always change and things can always end. So something completely unexpected might happen, and then what are you going to do? So you have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
Right, and that's exactly it. It's that everything that we're talking about today, we're talking about it from our own experiences. I have very strong opinions about taking control of your illness, but that doesn't mean I judge people who currently aren't, right? You're not wrong. I'm telling you to kind of think about that, though, right? Like, and I know that that's going to be a trigger for some people.
Yeah.
I know that some people are going to be really freaking pissed that I say that, and that, you know, it's like that it is your responsibility to choose to get yourself better. But if you are mad at that, I'm happy, because I want you to think about why that makes you feel mad. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
but you're not in the same place as that I am, and that's okay. I wasn't always in this place.
And there's a difference too between what you're saying and then somebody. So how I'm interpreting what you said, and we've talked about, is maybe just the way that I think about it, and it kind of co-aligns. But there's a difference between having a mental illness and how it affects you, because I have plenty and they affect me, and there's certain things I can and can't do,
right?
And I know my limits. But there's a difference between knowing your limits and being like, okay, this is what I do, and then doing something and not taking responsibility for it because you have a mental illness. So if you really hurt somebody's feelings or do something that's detrimental to yourself or somebody else, and you're like, oh, well, I have this and that's why, and that's the end of the conversation for you, that's an issue to me, because it's not an excuse to treat others poorly or even yourself poorly. So there's certain things where, like, I have triggers because I have PTSD, and there's certain things I can't be around or can't do because I will lose my mind. And that's okay. And I know what they are, and I have to set boundaries for myself. But at the same time, like, if I treated somebody like shit because I was depressed, and it was like, well, I was depressed, and that's it. Like, no, I still owe them an apology. I still need to do what I can to make it right, and I still need to do what I can to not do it again. Because when you start making excuses for it and being like, oh, well, I did it because I have anxiety, or I did it because I have depression, that makes you feel like it's acceptable in that situation to, again, do it.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I mean, right? So, like, it's the same thing how I was saying in the beginning, how when you're in a mania, you are not truly saying what you feel, and understanding that if you have a parent or a loved one or a friend or whatever it is, and I'm telling you that that's not really how they feel. What happens a lot is that when you come off of that mania and then you start falling into the depression, you start beating yourself up for everything you said and all of that stuff and everything. And it takes a long time to be able to really be able to be in a healthy enough place to say, hey, listen, I said this and I'm sorry, but you should try to get yourself there, because there can be a lot of hurt that you cause in other people's lives. One of the most proud moments I've ever had, and I try not to go into too much about my dad because that's his story to tell, but I'm proud of my father because he, at an older age, he's still figuring stuff out, but he apologized. And what I feel really sad about is I watch him and there's still people who don't forgive him, and you don't have to forgive and forget, but if there's someone, it's one thing if it's a repeated behavior, I did this, I'm sorry, deal with it, that's one thing. But if somebody who really has mental illness and who has hurt you comes to you and says, I'm so sorry that I hurt you, I can't take it back, I can't change it, but I promise you that I'm going to do better. And this is the baseline of, if I'm this way, you remove yourself from me, or kind of like what I was saying, how I told Brandon, can you imagine never doing something stupid that we've all done, whether you have mental illness or not, and never being forgiven for it ever? There's some things that are unforgivable. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. But then there's also, you got to look and say, it depends on who the person is, what the person is at the core too, right? Like, my dad's a good person. My dad's a good guy. And he's the biggest heart. And he just got dealt freaking shit for his life. And he's trying his best to make it better. And so my decision is that, I'm moving forward with him. But on the other hand, I also understand his illness like nobody else.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's tough.
It is. And the other thing, too, that I was going to say, speaking of forgiveness, is like there are going to be people who don't forgive you. Yeah. And it's not their responsibility to forgive you. Right. Like, not everybody has to. Mm-hmm. Making amends does not mean that people are going to take your amends.
Right.
So it's important to make the effort, but it doesn't mean that they're going to respond in kind. And they don't have to. And that's okay, because that's their choice. Decision. So, like, people that I've hurt in the past, like, it's absolutely, like, my responsibility to apologize and things like that. But if they choose to not forgive me, that's their choice. And if I fucking hurt them enough that they decide that they can't, then I can't do anything about that.
It is what it is.
I can want them to
forgive me. You can learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not do it again, which I have. There have been things that I've done that I have never done and will never do again after lessons learned. But
because everything's a teachable moment.
Exactly. Right? But that person still hasn't forgiven me, the one that I'm talking about. Like, that instance, like, has not.
Yeah.
And they never will, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. I've just come to terms with it. Like, get it.
So what you decided to do is the best thing you can do, is you learned from it. Mm-hmm. Let nothing be a wasted experience, right? And that moment might have been what makes it so the next person that you're with is a way healthier relationship, right? Don't beat yourself up always because of the things that you go through, because it molds you into the person you are today, right? And as you can feel sad or bad and try to make amends, and like you said, not everybody has to forgive you, but you don't beat yourself up because they haven't forgiven you. Everyone has free will.
Yeah.
And it's, but learn from it.
It's important to do what you can.
Right.
And then that's where it ends.
Exactly. That's the thing, is that you can live a normal life, right? In quotation marks. Whatever the fuck normal is. And I know so many people who are still struggling. I know so many people who are still in denial. I know so many people who've lost their lives.
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri literally picked up everything that I said. Even Siri doesn't understand. Maybe we shouldn't post this because even Siri doesn't know.
No, that's hysterical. I'm not sure I understand.
Screw you, Siri. You know nothing.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
But that's the thing, is that every single person is at a different stage in their life. And just understanding, I think that that's the biggest thing that I want people to take away from this is, if you're triggered, really think why does this affect me? Why am I feeling this way? Know your triggers. Know when you're not being okay. Know when you're not all right. Mm-hmm. And really try to build that internal dialogue. If you are somebody who has bipolar, find a professional, because in the end, bipolar is not an illness that can just be medicationed and stopped, right?
It doesn't go away.
It doesn't. And you can't be fine and then get off it. No. It is a chemical imbalance in your brain, and that doesn't just get fixed.
No, and once you feel fine, that doesn't mean like, oh, I don't need medication anymore.
It means you're actually
like the medication's working and you need to keep it up.
Right? Learn yourself inside and out, and that's being responsible, having a mental illness and being responsible. And it's not a death sentence, and it's not a sentence for a horrible life. It's not. Mm-hmm. I think I have accomplished
You've accomplished a
some
shit ton
things that I don't know if I would have been able to accomplish without my bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it makes me be a ridiculous person sometimes, but me being a ridiculous person has made it so I create ridiculous things that work. Mm-hmm. And it's given me a beautiful life. I'm proud of being bipolar. I'm proud of being a successful woman in life, business, and friendships. Again, not perfect. I didn't say perfect. I said successful, meaning I have wonderful relationships. I have beautiful people around me. I have, I'm very proud of my accomplishments. I'm going to have massive failures in the future because I'm human. Mm-hmm. But I'm proud to say that I was able to accomplish these things and have a strong relationship with my husband and my children and build, businesses and be bipolar. And not just be bipolar, be a heavy bipolar. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Yeah.
Mental illness isn't something to be
ashamed
about.
It's not a death sentence.
It's not a death sentence. It's not a death sentence, and it's definitely not now your life sucks.
Yeah. Because your probably life already sucked. So once you know and you can get better, your life can only improve realistically. And yes, there will always be setbacks and fallbacks, but that is life for anybody.
And narrative can be here, but it should also be here.
Yes.
And setting boundaries out loud doesn't mean you're dumping on people. That actually is, I'm very triggered by people who are dumping on me. It's actually really interesting. It's been a very hard thing for me to not be mad at myself for, is I'm actually not a super good friend for bleeding people. Because I think I'm too hard. Mm-hmm. Because I don't have patience for it. It's not that I don't have patience that they're bleeding. It's, you can come to me, you can talk to me. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But I'm going to say, hey, how can we fix this? Right? What do you need from me? I'm not someone that's going to dump and then walk away. Because then I get mad. And that's not a right thing or whatever. And that's what I'm saying. I've had a struggle with myself on this because I'm am I a bad person for that? To me, it's if you come to me and you dump this on me, then you're asking me for help. And so I'm going to help you. But then if you're the type of person who hasn't made the decision yet to try to be better, I get mad. And I think the reason why is because I was raised around it. I was raised with it. And I already had to, I walked my dad's journey and I walked my journey, and I don't want to walk someone else's journey. Mm-hmm. And that sounds so selfish, but
it's not though.
And the reason why I want to bring that up, because if you're that person, that's okay. Mm-hmm. Because I can't walk that path with people.
And that's what I was kind of saying earlier, is it's not somebody else's responsibility to carry your burden. You need to ask if they're willing to listen. And something that I have learned to do and tell people to do with me, because I like to fix everybody's problems. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, broken, wounded birdie, I love you.
See, and that's the thing that's amazing, that we get along so well because we're such different people.
Mm-hmm. But I've come to learn, if you need a sounding board, you need to tell me, I don't want advice, I just want you to listen.
Right.
Versus just telling me, because I will be like, well, this is what you can do. This is what we can do about it. I can help you here, or you can help yourself here. And sometimes people don't want that. They just need somebody to vent to and listen, sound like you screaming in the sunroom. Sometimes they just need a human to be the sunroom.
Right.
And I need to know, because otherwise I will try to fix your problems. Also, it's not healthy for me to try to fix everybody else's problems. So I have come to terms with the fact that sometimes I can't, and I need to step back and be like, I'm really sorry you feel that way. I've been there. Go find someone.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was just going to say, is that if you are that person, don't just be like, all right, peace, deal with your shit, walk away, because then that person who's bleeding is going to take everything even bigger than it already is. Mm-hmm. And then you can contribute to the problem. I had somebody very close in my life who was really going down a bad, but I just couldn't it was giving me anxiety because I'm like, I can't go there with this person. I can't do this. It just made me, I was so tired and I hadn't even done it yet because I spent the whole beginning part of my life working with mental illness, whether it be my own or parents. And I couldn't do it anymore. I don't want the second half of my life to be about mental illness. I don't want it. And I had to have that hard conversation, but I didn't just walk away. I said, this is a me thing. I want you to be helped, and I want you to tell me how I can get help, find help for you. But then I need to release you to that help because I'm not the person to help you because I have too much frustration towards it. And it's not that you're wrong.
No.
I just can't walk that walk.
Because you have.
Because I can't. It's like turning back around and going back up the mountain. I can't do it. And that's okay. But you have to verbalize it. It's not that you're bleeding and you're wrong. It's that I can't shoulder that.
My pad is full.
My pad is full. Someone said one time, and I love this. This is like the best analogy in the entire world. There's only so many rooms to rent in your brain, right? If you think of your brain as like a multi-complex or
like an apartment.
Like an apartment building. And there's only so many rooms. Like for your own health, are there the right people in those rooms, or is there people who are healthier for your rooms? And that's what you have to. What is letting this person rent this room in your house gonna do to you? And understanding that if you're not that person, you need to verbally, kindly, and don't just walk away. Like I can help you try to get help, but then I need to release. And if you're not looking for help and you are looking for a sounding board, I'm not that person because I don't have that ability to just sit there. And if it's if Brandon, my husband, who I've committed my life to, if he says that to me, that's very different.
Yeah, because you've made that commitment.
Right. I've already given him permission, but I have to stop it if it becomes too much, just like I give him permission to stop it if it becomes too much. But that's walking together.
Yes.
Right? So you can be someone like you who that's like your path in life, right? It's we all have different reasons for being here. And they're
obviously I want to help people because I'm doing this.
You want to help people, and that's the thing, and it's so incredibly beautiful. And that's why I had some judgment on myself, but it's not that I don't want to help people. It's that I want to be, I don't have the energy to try to help people who don't want to be helped because I used up all the energy. And I might be in 5 years in a place where I can be there.
That cup is empty. You can't pour water out of an empty cup.
Right. But it's so wonderful that there's people who are able to do that.
It's just because...
And you probably find healing through it.
Yeah. I do. I find it, because I realize things about myself through helping other people sometimes. But I also have had, I've had to build boundaries and do things for myself because I was trying to help everybody all the time and it was not helping me at all. And I was really in unhealthy spots and didn't even realize it. But I really am happy doing my series, and I think this can help people without me having to directly take on everybody's burdens.
Right.
But I just want to thank you for doing this with me today. And being willing to talk about your story because it can be a lot to expose yourself and talk about the private things in your life.
Well, and for me, the biggest fear is always, it's funny because I'm not somebody who just naturally, I'm not somebody who's constantly thinking about what someone thinks of me or whatever, but I never want to hurt someone or trigger someone or have someone feel judged or have someone feel bad because of the words that I say. And so that's where I have always gone back and forth on. If you walked up to me, I will openly talk about anything. But then I get nervous. I was nervous to do this today because I'm like, and even this whole time I'm thinking in my head, oh, I just said that. That's a very strong statement. Someone could be watching this and it could it could make them angry, and that's why I kept saying if it triggers you, think about it. But you know, I've said out loud before. I was just at the salon talking to somebody about the physical feelings of how it feels in mania, and somebody heard me and they're like, "That's a really great way to verbalize it." And so that's why I want to be so open about it, because maybe it helps give you narrative, whether you're the person with bipolar, whether your loved one is the person who is bipolar, and just take what you will. Understand that even on the last piece that I just said about, you know, not being somebody who's you know, like, I can't be that sounding board, understanding that I don't have judgment to how you're living your life. I just hope that if you are somebody who is not hasn't had a chance to get a hold of their illness, that you think about it and you do make the decision eventually to start the path of taking care of your illness, and just kind of like taking something from it, I guess. I love you.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. Talk about a Tuesday with Joe and Missy.
He's the best.
I try. I try. I'm not the best at everything.
None of us are.
No. But, you know, see you next week. Next week's episode might be delayed depending on when I have time to edit, because I will be in Orlando when this launches for a work event, and I probably will not have much time to edit anything after that.
Well, so, this was long.
This was long.
I'm a talker.
No. But, so, depending, the following Tuesday may or may not have an episode, but after that definitely will. Thanks.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.